He had always laughed when immigration came up. Sitting in the cafe with his friends, scrolling through his phone, he would chuckle at news clips of ICE officers escorting people away. They shouldn't have been here anyway, he would say. His tone sharp, his heart cold. Deportations to him were a joke, an entertainment, another viral video to mock and share. He didn't think about the children left crying, the families broken, or the fear that rippled through entire communities. He just laughed, as if life and borders were games. But the day came when laughter turned to silence. It was sudden, like a switch flipped in the middle of his ordinary life. A sharp pain tore through his chest, and before anyone around him could react, he collapsed. His friends screamed, someone called for help, but his body was already failing. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics rushed in, but as they pressed their hands on his chest and shocked his heart, he slipped further and further away. Then it happened. The noise of the world grew faint, like a radio fading out. His body on the ground seemed far below, the voices muffled, the flashing lights dim. And in that moment of detachment, he realized, I'm leaving. He was rising, pulled upward, weightless, terrified. The room stretched away, the ceiling vanished, and suddenly he was standing in a vast, endless darkness. But it wasn't empty. Ahead of him, a light appeared, not distant and weak, but alive, radiant, drawing him with irresistible force. His fear turned into awe as the light grew brighter, and he felt himself pulled into its warmth. It was not the cold emptiness of death, but the overwhelming presence of something holy. And then, out of the brilliance, he saw them angels, mighty and unyielding, standing like pillars of fire. Their presence was terrifying, yet beautiful beyond words. He wanted to fall to his knees, but he no longer had control. The angels did not speak at first. They only looked at him with eyes that pierced his soul. He knew instantly that they saw everything, every word, every mockery, every careless laugh at the suffering of others. One of them finally spoke, his voice like thunder rolling through eternity. You thought nations were built by men alone. You thought borders were yours to mock. But the Most High appoints the boundaries of nations, and we are his witnesses. Now you will see what you mocked. You will see the angels who divide the nations. His heart shook. He had entered a realm where laughter turned to judgment, where every careless word weighed heavily, and where heaven itself would show him the truth behind what he had once ridiculed. The angel who had spoken lifted his hand, and suddenly the darkness split open like a curtain. Before him stretched something vast, greater than any map he had ever seen on earth. It was not paper or parchment, not screens or projections. It was living, glowing, breathing light. The entire earth appeared, continents and oceans, mountains and valleys. But it wasn't the way men draw maps with borders and lines. Instead, radiant beams of light marked territories, and fiery rivers seemed to flow where nations began and ended. He watched in awe as angels moved across this map like master builders, placing boundaries, shifting lines, protecting one nation, restraining another. Some carried measuring rods of fire, tracing invisible walls around lands. Others stood like guardians at gates, watching over entrances and exits, cities and harbors. What stunned him most was the order. Nothing chaotic, nothing random. Every boundary was set with purpose, every division marked with divine precision. The angel turned toward him and said, "Do you see? Nations are not accidents. Borders are not the inventions of politicians alone. From the beginning, the Most High appointed the times and the places where man should live. We, his messengers, establish and enforce what he has decreed." You mocked deportations as if man decides destiny, but it is God who decides where each soul belongs. He trembled, for he began to understand that what he had laughed at was not merely the struggles of immigrants or the authority of governments. He had mocked something sacred, the very hand of God arranging nations and people groups for his purposes. Then the map shifted. He saw America glowing brightly, but along its borders, darkness pressed in. Demonic figures clawed at the edges, trying to tear down boundaries, to flood in chaos and confusion. Yet the angel stood firm, swords of light in their hands, holding back what hell tried to unleash. He saw families crossing deserts, rivers, oceans, some fleeing oppression, some seeking hope, some driven by desperation. And he saw how both good and evil forces tried to use these movements for their own purposes. The angel's voice thundered again. Men see only politics. We see destinies. Men argue about walls and gates. We guard the spiritual order written before time. When nations forget this, chaos rises. But when they honor the one who sets boundaries, peace remains. He fell to his knees, or what felt like kneeling, in this bodiless state because the weight of what he was being shown crushed every arrogant thought he had once held. He realized he had laughed at what angels labor day and night to protect, and his soul burned with shame. The glowing map of Earth began to shift and unfold like pages of a book. He saw not just the present world, but the long story of history written in light. Nations rose like mountains from the sea, shining bright for a season, only to collapse like sandcastles under waves. Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, empires he remembered from history classes appeared before him, alive and majestic, their armies marching, their kings boasting. But just as quickly as they reached their height, the light around them dimmed and shadows consumed them. The angel stood watch as each empire rose and fell. Some marked boundaries with rods of fire, then erased them as time came to an end. Others blew trumpets of judgment, signaling the collapse of nations that had exalted themselves too highly. The vision terrified him, because he realized that nothing on earth was truly permanent. No empire was invincible. No nation, no matter how mighty, could stand beyond the hour written for it. The angel closest to him spoke again. Do you see? Men believe their kingdoms are eternal. They build monuments and armies thinking they control destiny. But every rise and every fall is written by the hand of the Most High. We divide the nations according to his decree. We are witnesses of both their glory and their downfall. He felt small, insignificant, as he watched centuries pass in moments. Kings who once ruled the known world were now nothing but dust in the vision. Powerful cities became ruins swallowed by sand and jungle. It hit him with crushing force. He had laughed at ice, at deportations, at borders, but in heaven's courts, whole empires had been erased in a single breath of God. What arrogance it was to mock what he didn't understand. Then he saw America appear on the map, burning bright like a torch in the night. He saw its rise from colonies to a nation of great influence, its borders stretching, its power growing. He saw blessings flowing upon it, families thriving, churches filled with prayer, fields yielding abundance, but he also saw shadows creeping into its foundations. Pride, greed, division, blood crying from the ground. The angel raised his hand toward America. Even she, though powerful, stands under the same law. Her time is measured. Her strength is not her own. If she forgets who gives her boundaries and her blessings, she too will fall. But if she humbles herself, mercy makes stand her hour. The man's soul shook. He realized that what he was witnessing was not just about immigration or deportations or politics. He was being shown the eternal truth that every nation, ancient or modern, is fragile before the throne of God. And for the first time, the laughter he once felt over others' suffering turned into tears as he whispered, "Lord, forgive me, I did not know." The vision shifted again, and the great glowing map dissolved into light. In its place, he saw a massive book descending from above, larger than any mountain, its cover blazing like molten gold. Angels surrounded it, their wings stretching wide, their faces bowed in reverence. As the book opened, its pages stretched out like endless scrolls, reaching further than his eyes could see. Each page shimmered with words of fire and rivers of light that seemed alive. One angel turned to him and said, "This is the book of nations. Here are written their appointed times, their seasons of rising and falling, their boundaries and migrations. Not one line is drawn without the command of the Most High. What men debate and fight over is already written here." As the angel touched the page, he saw names of nations glowing past, present, And even ones not yet born, empires that had fallen still had their records inscribed, their destinies completed. Nations that now stood strong flickered, their lines of light trembling as if waiting for a decree. Others, still unknown to history, rested in silence, their appointed times yet to come. His eyes widened as he realized what this meant, all of history, all the debates over borders, wars over land, migrations of peoples. It was all recorded long before men ever took power. He saw that angels were assigned to carry out these words, standing as guardians or executors of judgment, ensuring that what was written was fulfilled in time. Then, the angel turned the pages, and America's name appeared again. Its light pulsed brightly, but alongside it were warnings, words inscribed in fire. Blessing if she turns, judgment if she hardens. He trembled, for he saw that America's future was not guaranteed. It depended on repentance, on humility before God. The angel's voice thundered, "You mocked deportations, as if men alone decide where people belong. But behold, the migrations of peoples, the movement of families, the opening and closing of borders, these too are written in this book. Even the journeys of the stranger and the exile are under heaven's decree. To mock them is to mock the wisdom of God." Tears burned his eyes as shame overcame him. He remembered his laughter, the casual words, the way he treated human suffering as a joke. Now he saw that every displaced soul, every border crossed, every nation divided was part of a tapestry too vast for him to grasp. He felt the weight of eternity pressing against his own shallow judgments. The angel closed the massive book, and its thunderous sound echoed through eternity. The man's soul quaked, for he now knew that nations and their destinies were not playthings for men to laugh at. They were holy, and they were guarded by heaven's decree. The book faded from sight, and suddenly the vision shifted again. He was standing high above the earth, and below he saw the nations glowing in their appointed places. But then the light trembled, and he saw dark forces rising from the abyss. They were not men, they were spirits, twisted and furious, clawing at the borders of nations. They tore at the glowing lines of light, trying to erase them, trying to blend nations into chaos. Some of these spirits whispered lies into the ears of leaders, telling them borders were meaningless, that laws could be ignored, that nations were only human inventions. Others stirred hatred, wars, and corruption to shatter unity from within. Where they succeeded, he saw cities collapse into unrest, families torn apart, people scatter like leaves in a storm. The angel beside him spoke, his voice like a sword cutting through the vision. This is why boundaries are holy. The Most High appoints them to restrain evil, to protect the innocent, to preserve order until the appointed time. But the enemy despised them, for lawlessness serves his kingdom. Where boundaries fall, confusion reigns. Where confusion reigns, souls are destroyed. He watched as angels of light battled fiercely against these forces. They stood along borders like warriors on walls, their swords blazing, their wings stretched wide. Each time a demonic force tried to tear down a nation's protection, an angel struck back, holding the line. Yet in some places, where the prayers of God's people were weak, the shadows gained ground, and the glowing borders flickered dangerously. Then he saw America once more. Its borders glowed brightly, but demonic swarms pressed hard against them, seeking entry. The angels stood strong, yet they seemed to strain, as though waiting for reinforcements. The man asked in fear, "Why do they struggle?" The angel answered, "Because the prayers of the people strengthen us. When they pray, the light rises. When they forget, the enemy gains ground. Nations are not preserved by politics alone, but by righteousness and intercession." America's borders stand today because of prayers rising like fire, but if the prayers cease, the enemy will enter. He shivered, realizing how blind he had been. He had laughed at deportations, mocked borders, scoffed at laws. Yet here, in this place, beyond death, he was shown that boundaries were not merely about politics. They were battle lines between heaven and hell. Shame and fear filled him. He whispered, "Lord, I mocked what was holy. I laughed at what you yourself defend." And in that moment, he knew he had sinned not against men, but against the order of God himself. The vision widened again, and he was carried across time like a leaf swept by a river. He saw nations one after another, each glowing for a season and then fading into darkness. Some burned with brilliance, their people flourishing, their lands filled with abundance, but others dimmed until their lights went out completely, leaving only ruins and memories behind. He watched mighty empires fall, not because their armies grew weak, but because their hearts grew proud. Babylon towered high, then crumbled into dust. Rome stretched across continents, but pride and decadence rotted it from within. He saw nations consumed by violence, their borders erased because they mocked the decrees of the Most High. The angel pointed and said, "This is the law of heaven. Nations that honor his boundaries live in peace, but those that despise his order fall into ruin." It is not wealth, not armies, not kings that preserve a nation, it is righteousness. When a people reject the one who sets their borders, they invite destruction. The man trembled as the angel turned the vision toward America once more. He saw its cities pulsing with light, but he also saw cracks spreading through them like fractures in glass. Some glowed with prayer, righteousness, and mercy. Others flickered with greed, lawlessness, and pride. Along its borders, the clash of angels and demons grew fierce, as though America itself was being weighed in the balance. Then the angel declared, "She has been blessed more than many, yet she grows careless. Her strength deceives her. She laughs at what is holy, she mocks justice, she treats strangers without compassion, and she glorifies pride. If she turns back, she will endure. If she hardens her heart, her enemies will rejoice. Her fate is not in the hands of men, but in the hands of the one who decides the times of nations." The man's heart sank as he realized how blind he had been in life. He had thought borders and nations were only human inventions, political games to laugh at. But here he saw that every nation's destiny was written in heaven, and every fall was a result of rejecting God's decrees. For the first time, he understood the weight of his laughter, the way he had mocked deportations and families torn apart, without knowing the holy order at work behind it all. His laughter was not harmless. It was rebellion. He fell on his face before the angel, whispering, "Lord, forgive me. I mocked your order. I laughed at what you wrote with your hand. I see now nations rise and fall because of you alone." The air grew heavy, and the light around him darkened, as though eternity itself was holding its breath. Then he saw something far more terrifying than the rise and fall of nations in history. He saw the end. The great map of the earth reappeared, but this time it was different. It pulsed like a living heart, and every nation shimmered under the gaze of heaven. Angels gathered from every side, thousands upon thousands, armed with flaming swords and scrolls written in fire. A mighty angel lifted his voice like a trumpet. The hour is coming when nations will be divided not by men, not by politics, but by the decree of the King of Kings. At that moment, he saw angels moving across the map, separating nations as if with blades of light. Some were set apart for mercy, their borders sealed in radiant fire. Others were swallowed by shadow, their lights extinguished as judgment fell. The separation was swift, unyielding, final. He tried to look away, but the vision drew him deeper. He saw America trembling on the edge. Its borders flickered, half bathed in light, half pressed by shadow. Angels stood with swords raised, waiting for the command. He felt the urgency. America's future was not yet decided, but the moment was coming when it would be. The angel who stood beside him spoke again, his voice solemn. "Do you see now? Deportations, migrations, borders, governments. These are only shadows of the greater reality. In the end, it is not about men moving across lands, but about nations themselves being divided for eternity. Sheep from goats, light from darkness, mercy from wrath. The angels divide as they are commanded, and no power on earth can resist." The man's soul trembled in terror. He had laughed at deportations, mocked the struggles of displaced people, but now he saw the ultimate deportation, the eternal separation of nations and souls at the command of God. This was no joke, no headline to scroll past. It was destiny written in heaven, carried out by angels with blazing swords. He fell on his face and cried, "Lord, I mocked what I did not understand. Forgive me. Do not count me among the scoffers. And as he wept, the angel placed a hand upon him not to condemn, but to silence him in awe, for the final revelation was yet to come. The vision faded, and the sound of thunderous angel voices grew distant. The great map of nations dissolved into light, and for a moment he was left standing in silence before the one he knew was Lord. Though he could not lift his eyes, he felt the weight of eternity pressing down on him, the certainty that everything he had seen was not a dream, but truth beyond all debate. Then Jesus himself drew near. His presence was more overwhelming than all the angels combined. His voice was like living waters, and yet every word pierced to the marrow of his soul. You laughed at suffering, Jesus said. You mocked what was holy. You thought nations belonged to men, but they belong to me. I appoint their times and their places. I set their boundaries. I divide them at the end. What you ridiculed was not man's work, but mine. The man wept uncontrollably. He wanted to vanish, to undo every careless word, every cruel laugh, every moment he had treated human pain as entertainment. But Jesus' tone shifted not only stern, but merciful. Yet I have shown you this so you may testify. Tell them, every nation stands under my hand. Tell them, borders are not accidents, but decrees. Tell them, the day is coming when angels will divide the nations, and no scoffing tongue will remain. But tell them also, mercy is still offered. If they humble themselves, if they repent, I will heal, I will extend time, I will protect. Then he touched the man, and in an instant he felt himself pulled downward. The light receded, the angels vanished, and suddenly he gasped for air. His chest heaved, his lungs burned, and the sound of frantic doctors and machines filled the room. He was back in his body, on earth, alive. His first words shocked everyone around him. The angels divide the nations. I saw them. I saw Jesus. He decides it all. Now, with trembling hands and a broken spirit, he tells his story. He no longer laughs at ICE, at deportations, at the suffering of strangers. Instead, he warns anyone who will listen. Nations rise and fall under God's hand, and the day is coming when angels will separate them forever. What he once mocked, he now fears with holy reverence. And above all, he repeats the words he heard from the Lord. Mercy is still offered, but the hour is coming. Prepare.